Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Getting things set up here, checking audio and all of that. My guest today, Rayanne Buchianico of ABC Solutions, another Florida person, and I think it's going to be a good show. So let's get to it. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Podnuts Pro. I am your host, Marvin B., and I hope everyone is doing well on this Friday in November, and hope everybody has had a great week and life is getting back to normal and we can all start to enjoy our holiday season. Today's guest, Rayanne Buchianico of ABC Solutions, based out of Clearwater, Florida. Rayanne, how are you?
I'm doing great today, Marvin. How are you? And how did you just survive the storm this week?
So I'm doing good. And the storm for us was interesting. Obviously, we didn't have any of the high impact winds, although it was windy, but we had rain nonstop for basically 2 days. And we have had rain almost every day for the last 2 weeks. So we were already drenched and saturated. So we flooded much more than normal. And it took a couple of days for that to recede. Miami, south of us, is really bad. They are still having impassable roads. Neighborhoods are drenched and cars are getting stuck still. So it is interesting. Now, you got the second impact of the state on your side. How did you guys do?
About the same, right? So we had, we still have little pieces of trees all over the streets, and so slowly but surely we're picking things up. Mostly everybody I've spoken to, they did pretty well. I got a little bit of water. I had a little bit of leak in my roof, but nothing that I couldn't fix up. So yeah, we survived okay. It was literally the only storm that hit us this year, and in November of all things. So there's that.
Yep. We are waiting because our family reunion we do is always at the beginning of December in Atlanta. And over the years, all the trips that we have planned, the wife usually will go up a few days ahead of time. She helps with cooking and all that stuff, and she'll take up all of the food and all of the preparations. And I usually fly up on a Friday, spend the weekend, and let's just say 75% of the time, I haven't been able to make it because of hurricanes or approaching storms, and I've got to be around for the customers and stuff. So we're hoping that this year all the major stuff has happened. December will be good and clear, and I'll be able to make it to Georgia this time and probably do a podcast off a mountain.
That's pretty ambitious for 2020, but good luck with that.
It is. So, I meant to chat with you before the show and I didn't do it. So this is going to be already off schedule. But do you remember the first time we actually had interaction? Now, I'm not talking verbal interaction, but do you remember the first time you responded to anything that I had put out there in the universe?
I honestly do not, but
No.
Sorry for that. I was totally unprepared for that question.
It's okay. I know, but
But please tell me.
So December of 2018, I had a client doing a move in Tampa, and I actually had to work between Christmas and New Year's because the vendors did not get their stuff done ahead of time. The cubicles were not done. So I had to move a client from one large office, it was about 55 people, into two separate offices, one in Tampa and one in St. Petersburg.
I remember this.
And I sent out a request to the ASCII group saying, anybody know anybody local with a couple of texts that can help? And you actually responded.
I remember that now that you mention it. I don't think that I actually helped you, but I do recall responding to that. Please
No,
help.
you weren't able to help, but I remember that you responded, and you know what? That's good enough for me. So
Sorry that I wasn't able to help you. I don't know where I was, but
probably with
if
family.
you ever need, if you ever need, please reach out. I'm always happy to help.
All right.
MSPer.
So as I mentioned, Rayanne owns a business in Clearwater, Florida. I have a couple of client offices over there. So Rayanne, for people that don't know you, and most of my listeners probably do, but I'm sure there are going to be some who don't. You are a certified QuickBooks professional, and your business, well, let me just step back. One of your businesses is to help IT professionals with their accounting. Is that a good summary?
That's a fair summary. Yes, we do a little bit more than just accounting. We're pretty much a full service accounting and tax firm, and we really specialize in the IT market through the U.S. and Canada. We help IT owners understand their financials, actually measure, their service delivery, help them understand their PSA. I run a podcast with a friend of mine, Chris Tim, and it's called PSA Impact, where we talk about all things PSA and how to get the most out of your PSA system, whether it's Autotask, ConnectWise, Synchro, BMS. We try not to pick on any one specific PSA, but since Chris and I both know Autotask better than all of the others, it usually ends up being our target. Hey, this is how you do it in Autotask. So,
Right. But it's all good information regardless. So I've listened to several episodes, and you do
you're the one.
and you do try to, be a little broad and open-minded and not just pound us with the Autotask stuff. So you guys do a good job at that. And I'll have a link to that in the show notes, folks. PSA Impact, and a very good podcast to pay attention to.
So ABC Solutions is my core business, right? And it's ABC stands for Accounting, Business, and Computing Solutions. Years and years ago when I first started, I was both an MSP and an accountant, and I thought that I could be all things to all people, technology and accounting. So in the morning, I'm, fishing wires through ceilings, and in the afternoon, I was preparing tax returns. And, and just like every business, you start to realize this is totally not scalable. There's no way that I can do all of these things. And I'm like a Jill of all trades, and I'm, a queen of none, right? So I had to pick the one that made the most sense. And then Autotask came on the market, and I started doing a lot of Autotask consulting. So I didn't want to give up my technology and my Microsoft partnerships and all of those things. And Autotask really helped me, mirror or marry the two of those things together so that I could still be connected to technology while, doing the accounting. And the more MSPs I talked to, the more I found that many of them struggle with the accounting piece and the business management through the numbers. So that's where I've decided to specialize.
All right. So interesting, because now when I started, I, of course, tried to do what a lot of MSPs do. I'll just take care of the books myself.
Of course.
And I'll, do all my entering, my taxes, and I'll take care of it. How hard can it be, right? QuickBooks is easy.
Right. Oh, it does it for you, right?
Yes. And of course, I had a little bit of an issue with the IRS for 1 year, and that was a joy. So I quickly hired an accountant to take care of all that for me. So we'll get into a lot of that later on in the show.
Right. Well, you didn't go into business to become an accountant, and you really should not try, to be the thing that you're not in business to be, right? So it just doesn't make sense. Like, just like you would not be the person, to cut open somebody's head to perform brain surgery, because this is not where your focus needs to be. And all you're doing by doing your own bookkeeping and accounting is taking the time away from the things that make you the most valuable in your business, and it just doesn't make sense.
Okay, well, let me ask you this, because you mentioned that you started out as an MSP and you were doing the IT things and you were doing accounting. So let me just first start and ask, how did you get both of those? I mean, did you go to school for one and end up doing another, or did you have a interest? Were you one of those geeky people that said, I can do computers? How did all of this happen?
So it started off in the 90s. I was a staff accountant at a CPA firm, and we were resellers for an accounting system called Mass 90.
Ah,
And
I know.
so so as we were installing Mass 90, and for some of the smaller companies, we were installing things like Peachtree and OneWrite Plus, and then QuickBooks came on the scene much later. But so, as we were installing these systems and getting them running on people's networks, it just kind of naturally morphed into, well, we need to understand more about how these networks run. We need to understand more about how this server, goes. So off to MCSE training I go, and I got my first certification with Microsoft in 1998. So I had a lot of accounting background, and now I had an MCSE under my belt, and then SBS came out onto the scene around 2000, so and that those things sold themselves. You didn't even have to try, right?
Yep.
So it just kind of exploded, right, back then, and that's how I kind of got involved with both.
Okay. I guess that happens a lot. If you're supporting software and people want you to support the network as well, seems like a no-brainer at the time. But as you mentioned, it's tough to try to do everything. And I learned early on in my business, also started in the 90s, that I couldn't do that. There was just no way. And I settled on business networking, and I discounted everything else around it. Although now I've got to bring it all back in because it all connects to the network now. So joy there.
Right.
All right. So you also are part of a business called Sell My MSP.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is that something that just came about as a partnership where you saw an opportunity, or did you sell off part of your MSP business to focus on the accounting solutions for MSPs?
So the idea for Sell My MSP came about when I sold my tax practice back in 2011. I used a firm called Accounting Practice Sales, and they specialize in finding buyers and sellers for accounting practices. And I thought, I don't think there is one of those things for the IT community, and maybe there should be. So I reached out to my friend, Amy Babinchak, and she and I talked through, the entire process of how we recognize there's a need to help MSP owners that are looking to exit find an exit strategy. So we really started focusing on the exit strategy, and then what we found as we went along is that there were more buyers than there were sellers, or at least the buyers were more willing to come forward than the sellers were. So we had to find a way, to let the sellers put their ads up anonymously. And so we're finding that we still don't have an awful lot of listings. So Amy and I are going back to the drawing board to see what we can do, to make it a more valuable service to the IT community. So if you or anybody listening has an idea as to, what would make it a valuable service for you, please let us know, because we really do want to make it, valuable.
I have questions, but I don't want to start down this road because that's this podcast is about. So we may have to circle back because I know that there's a ton of M&A stuff happening, and
Yes.
uh, we could get lost in there. So let's go back to what you and I were planning to talk about. I'm going to try to stay on track, and that
Sorry, I derail you a lot. I get it.
so the things that we are supposed to do as MSP. So I mentioned that one of the things that I think is a problem for a lot of us is that we try to do it ourselves. We don't plan out things properly. And so a question that I wanted to ask you in the very beginning is, are IT professionals and MSP companies really good customers? Because if some of them are like me, we're pretty stubborn.
Many of them, by the time they come to us, they recognize that they need change, and so that they are open to it. And and of course, when I started my company 15 years ago, I wanted to be all things to all people, and so I found myself contorting our processes to match the MSP. We're a little less flexible than that now because we have a process that works, and it's an automation process. And so, if we can just get you to follow these simple steps, we'll be able to take all of your information and make good use of the numbers. So most of the time, by the time they come, looking for help, they are ready to undo, all of their bad habits that they've built. Like the posting of expenses directly from the bank feed inside your QuickBooks. Oh, I don't need a bookkeeper. All I have to do is click the add button 25 times a day, and all of my expenses are entered, and voila, I've got financials. They may be meaningless, but the numbers are in there and the bank account reconciles. So, yes, I find that MSPs are generally very good clients for us because they understand our business model, because it's just like theirs. We have a monthly fee. It's the same fee every month. You know exactly what you're getting for that fee. There's lots of things are included, and very few things not included, like special projects or whatever. But, it's very predictable. You're not going to get a bill for $100 this month and $1,200 next month. It's very budgetable, which is pretty much how you US MSPs,
Yep.
sell your services to your clients. It's very budgetable.
So we like it. Now, do you have a lot of clients that come to you where you have to fire the accountant, or do you work with the accountant, or how does that work in terms of if somebody like me comes to you? I have an accountant that I've had for almost 20 years.
Mhm.
Um, do you kind of replace him or help him?
So generally, if you have a relationship with your tax preparer that you've had for a long time and you really like them and you're comfortable with them, no, we don't force you to swap, jump ship and come to us. We will happily work with your tax preparer and make sure that they get the numbers that they need on a timely basis. And, we'll even still help you with income tax projections, as part of our service. And so that you're more prepared. If you only see your tax preparer once a year in March, you may not be prepared for the tax bill if somebody doesn't prepare you. But if your tax preparer reaches out like we do every quarter, hey, let's do a quick tax projection. Let's see where you are, and if things stay the same, this is what you're going to owe next year on your income taxes. And so then we use that information to make plans accordingly.
So one of the things that, and the reason I asked that question, and first of all, I don't even know if I like my accountant. I've never thought about liking or disliking. I just figured I need somebody to do it. They're good. Just do it. But one of the things that we struggled with is as we started to transition to a actual MSP model, and needing to create new items for RMM categories and things like that, it's been a struggle trying to restructure all that. So that was one of the reasons I asked you if you work with the accountants or replace them, because most accountants aren't on board with the MSP model.
Right. Well, and don't hold that against them. They just don't simply they simply don't understand it, right? So an accounting firm, CPA firm, whomever, generalist, they think in terms of revenue, cost of sales, expenses, net profit, without really diving in to make sure, hey, are your product margins where they're supposed to be? Are your service margins where they're supposed to be? And how are you doing? Do you have enough in gross profit to cover your fixed expenses? So on and so forth. So that's, and I think that's probably what sets us apart from a lot of the generalists out there, because that's all we do. We live and breathe technology and IT services, in everything that we do. So when we're looking at your P&L, or you've got a chart of accounts and you're like, okay, I can't get any decent numbers out of this. What do I do? So the first thing we're going to do is rip apart your chart of accounts, and talk about the different revenue streams that you have, and get them all lined up, and then start moving the revenue and the costs into those proper accounts, so that you can see them like lined right up next to each other. It just makes it so much easier to read, if everything's properly aligned.
Right.
So, yeah. Then, once it's all set up, then we send it back off to the accountant, and they can prepare the taxes, because I don't think that they really much care. When you're doing a corporate tax return, the IRS doesn't ask what your product sales are versus your revenue. It just says one line, revenue.
Right.
Total sales, and then total cost of goods sold, and your options are like purchases, labor, and other, so it's when we're talking about income taxes, it's just it's very cut and dry. But when we're talking about managing your business, it's a lot more in depth than that.
Right. Yeah, we've got the same accountant for both our business and the personal. And because I'm a C Corp, I'm an S Corp, and it passes through. So it does get a little complicated when you're trying to do deductions for the business versus deductions for the house. And so all fun and games there for the accountants. So great.
And I always recommend that people, pick up the phone and call their accountants before they start changing up their chart of accounts. Before you hire me, you've already got this relationship with them. Give them the opportunity to step up and help you. And if you go into your tax preparer, your CPA firm, whatever, and say, I need help. I need help to understand what's going on in my business. And if they just look at you and shrug their shoulders and say, well, gee, Marvin, I really don't know. I doubt seriously that's going to happen. If you ask them for help, I'm certain that they're going to do everything in their power to help you. It's up to you to decide whether or not their help is the help that you need.
Okay. So with that in mind, you go to your accountant and you try to plan things out. You go beyond that, and just to show you that I'm not lying when I say I follow some stuff, I've seen some of your blogs, and you have blogs that are a little bit different. And the one that I last took note of is the one where you talked about a 13-week cash flow,
Mm-hmm.
which most people don't look that far ahead.
I
didn't.
So yeah, the 13-week cash flow actually came out of Traction. If anybody here has read Traction or Get a Grip, so I started to get this idea, and a ton of my clients were begging for some sort of forecast on cash. When am I going to run out of money? What happens if my biggest client fires me next month? What's going to happen, in 2 months? Who do I have to fire? What do I have to change? What am I going to do? So we put together this 13-week cash flow, projection. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to be unveiling it on on my next course with a great little seminar. It's QuickBooks Online Automation. And one of the weeks we talk about is cash flow and cash flow forecasting. So I'm going to walk through that entire piece. Anyway, we'll get to that class later. But thank you for noticing that. I think that even if you're only looking 6 weeks ahead, I think it's really, really important to know, now if you're not gonna have enough money to cover payroll in 3 weeks, and because then you can step up collection efforts, you can do all sorts of things to really help, bring the money in, so that you're not like, oh crap, payroll's Friday and I've got $1,000 in the bank, because cash flow is one of the top concerns for MSPs.
Right. So the reason I said that I took notice of that, because I do have where I try to look out, a month ahead. But as an MSP, we kind of think of recurring revenue based on our contract. So if we've got, a 1-year contract, we think, okay, we've got that revenue going out 12 months. But I've never looked at trying to calculate, okay, how do I know what happens in between if A happens, then B, or things like that. So you can help with that in terms of restructuring the way we think, right?
Yes, yeah. And if you really pay attention in your business, Marvin, you're going to find that it's pretty cyclical, right? You know which customers pay early, which customers pay late, what day your American Express bill is due, what day the Pax8 bill is due. It just doesn't change a great deal. And so really all my 13-week cash flow forecast does is, is bring it all out. This is going to happen on the 20th, and this is going to happen on the 25th, and this is going to happen on the 3rd. It just kind of rolls it for you so that you can keep a mental idea in your head.
Okay. Now, what about something like year-end planning, which I'll be honest, I don't do year-end planning. I know which reports I need to create to send off to the accountant, and that's about it. I just make sure that they're done, and then usually he'll call me. Now, I should probably not tell you this, but so we send in the personal, we get an extension.
Okay.
And I don't think we send off stuff until like September of the following year, October, whatever the thing is. So we get delayed a lot, and I know he gets frustrated with that, but it's just one of those things happening. But what are some things that we can do to better plan for year-end, taxes, to make life easier and to help us hopefully get more profit at the end of the year?
Right. So, one of the top, how am I going to word this? One of the top purposes of doing year-end planning is to reduce your income taxes, which can sometimes be a double-edged sword, and remind me that in a second. But if you do year-end planning right now, right? Open up your P&L, run the P&L, open up your accounting system, run the P&L. How much are you making? What's going to be the tax on that? What can you do today to reduce that? And it's a lot easier to do tax planning items before the year ends than what I generally call post-mortem tax planning. So, because once the year ends, you're really limited in the things that you can do. I think your options are like a SEP or an IRA, and that's about it. Those are the only things that you can really, declare after the year ends. But before the year ends, you have time to buy new equipment, get a new car, issue some year-end bonuses. There's all sorts of different things that you can do. You can bonus yourself and pay in your taxes, and by the double-edged sword, by that I mean, because I do this pretty aggressively with a lot of my clients. We will open up, we'll do the tax projection and make a lot of, last-minute decisions, in the business, in order to bring that net profit down so that their taxes are down. Well, when you go to sell your business, now your EBITDA is low, and now your prospective buyer doesn't want to buy the company for what it's really worth. So then you have to go through the effort of explaining, no, if you look at our 9-month numbers, you're going to see that our profits are way up, and then they drop dramatically in the fourth quarter because it's all tax planning. And so now you have to convince them that you're not just crappy business people, you actually did that on purpose, right? So that you could keep more of your money. Retirement plans are always a good thing, but the key here is know what you're going to owe before the end of the year. Make the decisions to change the amount that's going to come out of your pocket. If you owe the IRS over $1,500 on your personal return, and you had not made any estimated tax payments, the IRS is going to penalize you for having not made your estimated tax payments. So one of the ways that you can get around the underpayment of estimated tax penalty is by issuing a bonus through payroll, right? So because any taxes withheld from a paycheck are deemed withheld equally throughout the year, and they don't count. So on December 31st, you can write yourself a $10,000 check, put it all into federal withholding, reduce your taxes, and you'll never get penalized for making such a late payment.
So funny you chose that as your example, because that's what happened to me in the beginning, where I didn't do those estimated payments, which is why I decided, nope, let's incorporate, let's do a regular paycheck, regular taxes, and not have that issue happen again. So,
right. Yeah, because it's a common one. It's a very common one. And it hurts. It's a tough lesson to learn.
Yeah. I remember that number like it's seared in the back of my mind. Now, here's another thing that as you were talking, I started thinking. So one of the things that my accountant hasn't really said anything about, and something I do every year, is, basically, I don't look to make any effort to pay stuff until I see how much money is left. So starting at the beginning of December, when I know I've got, stuff coming up, then I decide, okay, how much am I going to put in the IRA, which, we have until I think it's April 15th the following year to put that in, and then to match the employer side, something like that. I figure out how much to do a bonus, how much I can prepay of expenses in January to take advantage of expenses for this year. But I don't do that until, sometime in January. Is that something where planning ahead would take care of that, and you just know what it is before we get to that point?
Right. So there's a bunch of other really helpful tips. One strategy is, if you're a cash basis taxpayer, simply stop making deposits towards the end of the year. Hold on to those checks and let them become part of your next year's revenue. Right. So so you just take a pile of checks, stick them in the drawer, and then on January 2nd, run them to the bank, because if you're trying to reduce, the amount of income that you have. But also, if you're a cash basis taxpayer, then you're going to need to pay those bills before the end of the year in order to get a deduction. Now, if you're accrual based taxpayer, you can enter the bills and pay them in January, and but you should, I would say at the beginning of December, plan out the way the rest of that month is going to go, because you only have those 31 days, to really define what's going to happen on your income tax returns. And because that's the only time you really have control. After, when January comes along, sure, you can say, all right, I've got an extra $15,000, and I'm going to stick that in my SEP. A SEP IRA is something that it's an employer only benefit for It's not, the employee doesn't contribute to a SEP IRA. You can extend your income taxes, then you'll have until September to make that, that SEP deposit. So, and that's a good, cash flow planning thing. You can take the deduction in the current year, and not pay it until September of the next year. So that's one of the things that you can do. Simple IRAs have, more stringent rules because the employee is contributing. So once employee money is involved, the rules change. You don't get to hold on to your employee's money for very long. And the IRS is very, very clear about that. So, yeah.
Yep, and that's the one I have. I have the simple, so it does get a little complicated to stay on top of it. So
the employer match is good until the extended due date of the tax return, but the employee
has to be paid.
Has to be paid by the 10th of the following month.
Right.
So yeah, you've got to stay on top of that.
Yep. Love my accountant. So this has been an interesting year per se. I know that you did several talks on PPP loans and helping people through, COVID loans and all of that stuff. What types of things can people do not only to prepare for the end of this year, because I know accounting is going to be all jacked up because of that, but also to plan for 2021, because, some people are going to have to pay that money back, right?
What a cluster. Yeah, so there are actually a few people. I've got like 3 clients whose forgiveness has officially gone through, right?
Oh, okay.
And that's like so exciting. So if your bank is accepting forgiveness applications, do it now. The best of all worlds is to get this loan forgiven before the end of 2020, because the loan money, the loan proceeds that you received, once they're forgiven, those proceeds are not taxable. But you also cannot deduct the payroll that you paid with those proceeds. So effectively, it is taxable, right?
Okay.
They're just not calling it taxable. They're just saying that those expenses are not deductible. Same, right? So it doesn't matter. The challenge is going to be that if the expenses were incurred in 2020 and the forgiveness happens in 21, then do you get to deduct those expenses in 2020 and then claim the income in 21? Do you have to go back and amend the 2020 return in order to not claim those expenses? We don't know the answer to that yet. And the IRS has been very slow to tell us what to do when this forgiveness crosses the tax year. And Congress seems very uninterested in helping move this along. So right now, I'm taking the following steps. I'm taking the expenses off of the P&L and moving them into the balance sheet in anticipation of the forgiveness. And I'm also encouraging my clients to perhaps not file their tax returns on time, get an extension for the tax returns until we can find out what we're supposed to do with this, because the timing of that forgiveness is probably really critical. So I've got 3 clients that I know what to do with, right?
So apply for the forgiveness, and if you get it, then you can make a clean break for 2020 versus 2021. If you don't get the forgiveness, then delay applying your filing taxes.
Right, until we can get some guidance. Thank you for that simplified summary, because I don't know how to simplify it.
I'm just making sure I understand. Even though I didn't get a loan, people still, for some reason, ask, and we all, everybody has an opinion, but until we get guidance, that was a very good way to put it. If you get the forgiveness, then you're good. If not, delay.
Right.
So, okay, great. Now, I was just thinking of something that just flew away.
Squirrel.
Well, it was because again, I didn't do any of the forgiveness loans. I didn't do, they had SBA loans, they had PPP, they had this and that. I didn't do any of them. So I can't think of a situation to to ask you, what should we be wary of? But
So one thing that I can say is that if you receive the PPP loan and you receive that EIDL advance, that $1,000 per worker up to
right.
$10,000. So that grant, it takes away from the amount of your PPP loan forgiveness. So if you receive the full $10,000, expect to repay $10,000 on that PPP loan.
Oh,
And it's 1% over 5 years. You'll have 5 years to pay off that $10,000 at 1% interest. But you should be prepared that your PPP loan will not be entirely forgiven if you also receive the advance.
okay. So, okay, here's a question because I know everybody was trying to get everything, or not, I shouldn't say that, not everybody, but a
Many
lot of people were trying to get as much as they could. So, if there was a strategy, and I don't know if you even did this with your clients, but if there was a strategy to follow in the beginning, should it have been something where maybe you picked one and not the other, or maybe not tried to get all the money? Because a lot of people got money, didn't really know what to do with it, and now it's trying to figure out, okay, well, what do I have to pay back? I mean, should there have been a strategy? Should have just gotten the EIDL and not worried about the PPP, or what do you think?
If I were to choose one over the other, I totally would have gone with the PPP loan because
Okay,
that was your guaranteed free money. And I did encourage people to go and get their $10,000 EIDL grant. Because at the time it was also new and we saw the economy coming to a screeching halt. Everybody's locked in their homes. Nobody knew what was going on or how long this was going to last. And the reality is that we're all humans and we're all resilient and we figure it out. But at the time, it's just like, hey, I need to stockpile some cash. I don't know what's going on right now. Things aren't too bad. Or, in the hospitality, I have a couple of MSP clients and their vertical was the travel industry that just literally tanked overnight. And so a lot of them really suffered from it. But, so yeah, I don't think that I don't think that getting the EIDL advance and the PPP was a bad strategy. I don't even think taking the 30-year EIDL loan was a bad strategy. But each company really needs to reflect on their own needs and their own future and determine what is the best way to go. That EIDL loan is a 30-year loan at 3.75. So what you've really just done was taken out a mortgage on your business, and so you could, and you can hang on to that money and you can pay it back, as soon as it's due, if everything is going fine. But if everything is not going fine, you may need that money in order to survive the next lockdown. So, I think people just really have to, take a hard look inside, as to what they need or what they feel most comfortable with.
all right, all right. And you said the next lockdown. So you're in the same state as I, Florida, and I talk about Florida man all the time, not wanting to adhere to any guidelines, wear mask or whatever. And the numbers have been going up for us. So how has it been for you on that side of the state? And do you think that we are truly headed back to a situation where, we may have to close some stuff down again?
Well, I just wish that, and while Florida is bad, it's bad everywhere right now. The northern states, they're heading into what's going to be a very difficult winter. We're in Florida and we're just entering in the outdoor season. We're just coming out of the indoor season, right? So
Right.
our indoor season is in the summer when the north it's their outdoor season, and it kind of reverses in the wintertime. So I suspect that the indoor season, in the northern states are really going to get hit pretty hard. And it would be really nice if we could just have um, one unified response, as to, and not everything's going to work, and no solution is the ultimate solution, whether it's masks or social distancing or stay away from everybody or whatever. Yeah, nothing is going to be 100%, right? It's just like birth control. Nothing is ever 100%. And, but at least we could try,
Right.
try to do something, to make this not as awful as it has been. And that's, I think, the one thing that we're missing the most is that unified response. And so I suspect that there's plenty of states already, issuing orders of no more than 10 people per gathering. And so I think that there's probably going to be another lockdown if this winter goes anything like last.
Right. Now, you obviously talk to MSPs and IT companies, not only all over the country, but outside of our country. Do you get a sense that the IT industry is kind of stabilized, or are people, some of your clients, like really scared and thinking we're going to have to go through this again with trying to figure out if we're going to keep all of our clients?
The pulse on the street in the IT community has been really weird over the last few weeks. One, products are at a complete shortage, right?
Hmm.
So literally people are starting to scramble. Do you remember that last March, I think it was? Um, there's still an Intel chip shortage. There's still computer shortages. I have one client who swears they just bought up the last of the Chromebooks in the United States for it was like this huge project of Chromebooks. So so people are going to start, I think MSPs are starting to get a little concerned, and they're starting to beef up their inventory because they're concerned of the shortage and the amount of time it will take to get some product in. And meanwhile, their customers, have been sitting around waiting since March to have some of their projects done, and they're just getting to the point where they just can't wait any longer. So they're starting to pull the trigger on these projects, which of course means that the MSPs need, the equipment, and, so the whole cycle begins. It's been such a crazy year, and if you think that people were stir crazy last March, try locking them down again, and wait till you see how the stir craziness, people start spending money when they're at home and they don't have anything else to do. I need a new computer. Now's a good time to get my roof replaced. Just it's human nature
It
to.
is. It is interesting. I mean, I don't know what to think. I ordered a ton of machines ahead of time because the funny thing is I had two clients that were holding off on doing their Windows 7 upgrades still. Finally decide, you know what? People aren't going to be in the office. This might be a good time to update those machines. So we did that. We updated about 30 machines over the summer. I've got 25 that I just ordered for another client. And I went through the joy of having FedEx take 32 days to deliver my machines from one city to the next. I mean, they were literally in the next city over and not coming to us. And so I've got a running beef with somebody, one of the listeners in the Facebook group. He's just now experiencing one package that has taken a few extra days, and he's got a project he's got to get done. So
Right.
it'll be interesting.
It's a concern.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, now you have to build in lead time, shipping time, on your quotes and your deliverable dates. So
Yeah. So I just had a question pop up about inventory because I haven't talked to my accountant yet about this. But in my case, we're going to have a ton of extra machines that we probably won't get deployed by the end of the year. I know he always yells at me about carrying so much inventory. Do you help MSPs in that regard in strategizing, not just how to structure their accounting, you know, books and the categories and stuff, but in terms of, we talked about the 13-week cash flow idea, but do you help MSPs, figure out what's the strategy on running your business, making the best sense of your money, whether it comes to, contracts, inventory, stuff like that?
Well, we talk about all of those things, and yeah, and quite frankly, I'm not sure that I've ever really understood why accountants come down on people for having inventory, because I generally put that right straight into the cost of goods sold on the tax return anyway, as for the cost of the purchases of it. So, so that especially if you're a cash basis taxpayer, you should get that deduction, for inventory based on the date of the purchase, and not on the date of the sale. If you are an accrual-based taxpayer, I guess you do have the option of dating your customer invoices December 31st, even though you're not going to get to that project until sometime in January or February. But you've got to get these things matched up into the proper period. As far as the inventory goes, yeah, we will work through the different numbers, and see which is the better way to go for you.
All right, I'll have to call them. I didn't want to, because I've got a customer that.
I mean, it's November here, and you should be picking up the phone and contacting your tax preparer and say, hey, maybe we should just take a quick peek and see what's going on this year,
Right.
and because it's just, this is one of those years that you haven't been able to predict anything.
No. And with customers, and that came up because not only do I have a ton of stock here already, but I had a customer say, hey, we want to order ahead of time, even though we may not want to deploy until next year.
Right.
That could be another 50 machines for me. That's
Right.
just, sitting here.
And my guess is that they're going to want to pay you for it even right now, so that they can get that expense on their books in 2020,
Right.
because they probably have profits that they need to get rid of too.
Yeah. So they're thinking about that. So I guess I better think about it. All right. All right. So we are coming up close to the end of lunch hour. We, of course, have tons of other stuff we can talk about. But
I can talk about this stuff all day.
well, let me do this. You had mentioned that you are doing a course coming up, and another place that I follow you is a great little seminar. And if people go to that right now, you have a course coming up November 24th through December 22nd. You mentioned the name Automate Your Accounting with QuickBooks Online and Integrated Apps.
Mm-hmm.
So
So just a quick, a quick summary of that course, because I also do the QuickBooks Desktop for IT service firms course with great little seminar, and a financial processes course. So I built this course specifically around QuickBooks Online. And so whether you're thinking about moving to QuickBooks Online and don't know enough about it, or all you hear is a bunch of negative stuff about QuickBooks Online, and you want to really see what it can do, or you're already using it and you'd like to get the most out of it. So my firm really put together a whole automation process built around QuickBooks Online. And believe it or not, it's actually a pretty powerful system. And especially with a lot of the automation tools that we use HubDoc, we use Bill.com, we use Fathom for reporting and KPIs and metrics and all of those other things. So I run this course on using QuickBooks Online to manage your IT firm, and and how you can automate it in your own company, so that you're not just clicking the add button from the bank feed, but actually running an automated accounting system.
okay. Now I'm not going to ask you to give away any information just yet, but
Again,
you talked about the integrated apps. So are these apps from the Intuit workplace where they've got their products that work directly with it, or are you talking other apps that we can use to help automate the QuickBooks?
So some of the ones it's kind of all over the map because I'm not an Intuit rep. I have a love-hate relationship with
Don't
Intuit,
we all?
right? So, but I want something that works, and I don't want to have to work that hard at finding something that works. So, whenever there's a new tool out, like there's this new cash flow forecasting tool that I actually was working with the developer to help them get a useful tool. It's called Monit, MONIT.app, and I don't get paid for any of that, but it's a really cool tool. And well, that's because I helped I helped them develop it, but I didn't do any of the writing. I was kind of like the outside brain. This is what the business owner wants to see. And can we get this in here? And can we do something like that? So I was just instrumental in working with them. But so I use. I go through a bunch of different apps and the whole thing is not even all about the apps, but it's as we start touching on things like cash flow or financial metrics or managing payroll and all of these other things, if I found an app that really helps to automate it or simplify it, then I introduce it.
All right. So I'm going to get my office person to sign up for that one. So see if we don't use QuickBooks Online, but I'm sure there's going to be stuff that we can take from that. So greatlittleseminar.com, and look for the courses there, automate your accounting with QuickBooks Online and integrated apps. Now these courses, they're not major things. They are 5 hours, 1 hour a week.
1 hour a week for 5 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not a major investment of time or money, but I change it up every time. If you're ever in one of my courses, you could take that same course again a couple of years later and learn a bunch of new stuff. So I am constantly working, to put in new and updated information.
Sweet. All right, folks. There you have it there. Rayanne Buchianico, ABC Solutions, out of Clearwater, Florida.
Thanks so much, Marvin. It's always great to see you.
Great to see you. I want to thank everyone for either watching or listening. Make sure that if you want to be notified anytime we've got these shows coming up, head over to YouTube or the Facebook page and sign up to be notified there by liking the pages. You can also go to podnuts.com and subscribe to the audio podcast there. Podnuts is spelled with a Z, PODNUTZ. And that's going to do it. So thank you very much for listening. And until next time, holla.